Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. So today I want to talk about virtual teams because as I reflect on the past 5-ish years, goodness gracious, 5 years of my business, I can't help but reflect on the fact that from day one, we were 100% virtual. From the first hire I ever made, we were 100% virtual. And I cannot operate any other way, nor do I really understand how anyone does operate any other way. I kind of do. I used to work in companies that were all in person, but switched to virtual quite quickly in my career. And it's always been part of my journey. So I wanted to share with you some ways that have helped me manage virtual teams, but I've also seen a lot of mistakes made. And I want to share those with you as well, because a lot of the mistakes have informed the way I approach things. And it's really important. And, some of my virtual employees are listening to this episode right now, editing it. Maybe they can weigh in. But here's the thing. I get asked all the time by fellow accountants, especially. Oh my God, how do you take your firm to virtual? I'm going, how do you still use paper? Right. So let's reflect on the last 5 years of Keep What You Earn Co. and figure out, how do we make it work? What are the success factors and what are the things to avoid? Let's dive into it. So, number one, virtual happy hours suck. Okay. So don't do them. Don't keep your team after quote unquote hours. If you're going to maintain working hours, if you're going to maintain standard working hours, number one, be conscious of the time zones. Be conscious of where the team's working. So if you're like me and you have a team that's pretty scattered, we scatter all the way from the Eastern time zone to the Mountain time zone. Just know that in the morning, your Mountain time zone person is probably going to be ready to go at, say, 11 a.m. Eastern. So we have these hours between like about 11 and 2 Eastern or 11 and 3 Eastern, where that's kind of the meat of the day when most people are probably online or accessible, or it's not inappropriate to call them or not annoying. So we know that, and we try to concentrate communication in that area, along with clients too, keeping that in mind. So try to keep a concentrated communication time and try to host any team meetings in that window when you know that nobody will be inconvenienced. So try to do that as much as you can, just so that nobody feels left out or nobody feels like an afterthought. And speaking of which, let me go back to my accounting firm days for a second and share something with you. So when I was in the accounting firm, I worked in a practice. So I worked in audit for several years. And then I switched in 2011. I remember this vividly because it was on 11/11/11 at 11 a.m. that I got the offer. Right? Weird. And I switched over shortly thereafter, in 2011, 2012. And I remember, and this was before, like clearly before COVID, clearly before any remote arrangement was acceptable. So keep this in mind. Like go back in time with me to before Zoom. Anyone knew what Zoom was a thing. Skype was barely a thing. Okay. So take yourself back there for a second and understand how difficult this was. We were a satellite office in Boston, roughly 6 people, maybe even less actually at the time, but 6 people. Okay. In a group that consisted of about 35 people in New York City. So we were 35 in New York, 6 in Boston, and then maybe a couple of other scattered remote people. And I gotta tell you, I remember one of my biggest memories from that time was what we would call lunch and learns. Have you done these before in, a corporate job where you go and they bring in food, they have it catered, or they bring in pizza and they do a training. Like they bring everyone together for an hour of training, but they feed you lunch. So they call it a lunch and learn. So basically in that lunch break that you have, you're doing company time of learning and getting training in. And it was great because we got our CPEs, which are our continuing education credits we need to maintain our CPA licenses. So like, yay, win-win. Except for the 6 of us in Boston. Okay, picture this. There's a room a loud room of 35 people in New York City in a conference room. There are 6 of us in Boston in one tiny little conference room, just with one table. Think about what's actually happening here. Number 1 is the Boston people, we have to go buy our own lunch with our own money because we don't have lunch catered. Number 2, we have to listen to about 15 minutes of empty chit chat happening. It's like the soundtrack to a busy, loud restaurant without anyone around you. So we had to listen to the chit chat. Nobody was engaging with us. Everybody forgot we were on the phone. We were just a black round disc on the middle of the table. So we felt very isolated. We felt very lonely. We would talk to each other at best. And even then, the one thing we could bond over is how annoyed we were with everything going on in New York. So it's really not a helpful practice when you think about it. If you have remote employees, you need to make them feel involved. You need to make them feel engaged. If you're going to host, let's just say you have an in-person element and a remote element, you know, the one thing you could do if you're going to implement this is at a minimum, if you're going to offer lunch or if you're going to offer birthday cake or if you're going to offer something to the in-person team, at least send a gift card. Send them a Starbucks gift card. Send them a gift card to their local sandwich shop or deli. Find out their favorite place. Send them a gift card to go pick up lunch on you and meet you back at the desk, where they're going to dial in. You have to give them the same experience. You have to do your best to create that experience. And, another thing too is just birthday gifts, recognition, make them feel just as special as the in-person people because we can get this sense of out of sight, out of mind. Okay. Out of sight, out of mind. And the default operation is to feel isolated when you work remotely. And yes, there is a choice element to that where you choose to work remotely. But a lot of people do so because of requirements in their household or because they just can't manage the commute or it just doesn't make sense for them. But you shouldn't treat them any differently and definitely not lesser than. And I think it's really important to also host some type of meetup. If you have a fully remote team, and this is something we're trying to do more of this year, we went way too long during COVID not actually meeting each other in person. And you would never know we haven't met each other in person just based on how we interact with each other. I've only met a couple of my team members in person, but I feel like I've known them for years. And that's a really important thing. And especially this is true of, fellow mastermind members and business community members I've met virtually since COVID. I met some of my mentors. I've met some of my friends I've only known through Zoom for 5 years. There are people I met 5 years ago that I've been in contact with nearly weekly or monthly that I had never met in person. And the funniest part of that is that when I finally did meet them in person, they didn't believe me that this was the first time we'd met. I was clearly way more excited than they were to see them. And they just looked at me like it's another day when we see Shannon. And I'm like, I've never actually gotten to like touch you, hug you, say hello, like make eye contact, like in real life, in person. And it was so joyful for me to actually experience that with the people that I had met on the computer for so many years. And you don't wanna give people that sense that they have to wait super long or that you're inaccessible, you're only accessible online. You have to make, especially if you're the founder, especially if you're the owner, please make the effort that if you have virtual employees, make the effort to go out and see them or to meet up in a central location. Maybe even do a team retreat, a team getaway, rent an Airbnb or go to a hotel somewhere and host kind of a goal setting meeting, host a 2-day workshop, bring in a speaker, bring in experts, take them through an experience. I mean, I would love it if all of my team had passports. Courtney, I'm talking to you listening to this. If all of my team had passports, then we would be able to come down to Costa Rica perhaps, and I could take them through a volcano hike and like do the beach time and all that stuff. Now you have to make sure that everyone would enjoy that and find it worthwhile and that, it's cost effective for everyone or for you if you're paying for it. And it has to be worth their while. So just keep that in mind. Also, if you have contractors, it might be trickier because you have less control over their time and you may not be able to do that. But I would strongly recommend having something in the no business time zone to be able to connect and to actually go on a trip and invite them out. And of course, while you're doing that, you don't expect them to work. And yes, the business is going to slow down for a couple days, even close up shop for a couple days. So what? You should be able to do that. Do something that you all enjoy and actually take the time to understand the perspective of each team member. Maybe have them tell stories of their past jobs. Maybe have them tell stories of wins, stories about clients, stories about something, right? That would be really good for team building, and take them through these different exercises to get to know each other better. It doesn't have to be cliche. It doesn't have to be, your typical trust walks or personality quizzes and things like that. But there are different ways that you can connect with your team on a different level. And, one idea that I had was I was going to, and I may still do this, I was going to meet up with the team and have each person present one of the most impactful pieces of content they've read, listened to, or watched this year. So to go find perhaps someone who influences them in the form of, content, a mentor, a course, a book, or something that they had experienced, pull a relic from that, pull a quote from it, pull something, and just really unpack why it had a meaningful impact for them this year. And it also helps you connect with your team and see where are they at right now? What are their goals? And to really understand that these are humans behind the screen that also have goals and ambitions. So when you're managing a remote team, and this is true of any team, by the way, this advice I've shared in this episode is universal, whether they're remote or not. But especially with remote teams, I've been in that pod of neglected people on a remote team. I have been neglected several times as a remote worker. And it only enhances my passion to make sure nobody feels that way working for me. And we want to go above and beyond for our remote workers and make them feel like, hey, we're here for you and that we can support you and that, we're always around, just like we're in the cubicle next door. Because when you work in a business by yourself, it may be lonely when you can't tap on the cubicle next to you and say, hey, I have a quick question for you. We want to create that environment either through direct messaging, Slack, Asana, other things where we're always interacting with each other. And I know you can find a version of that for your business as well. So I would ask you that walking away from this episode, think of one thing, at least one, that you could do to make your remote employees feel seen, heard, and understood today. Or one thing that you could implement into your routine, weekly, monthly, quarterly process that would help enhance that relationship that you have with your remote employees, where they can't even fathom the idea of working anywhere else, even if it meant being in person and participating in more activities. Definitely consider if you're making any team member feel isolated. They may not tell you that they are, but you'll know if there is a different treatment between the in-person and the remote employees. So address it. Make sure people feel supported and just make sure that you're communicating well. That's all I would ask.
One of the best decisions I made in business that saved me countless headaches was getting expert advice in HR as I started growing my team. With so many compliance requirements, especially for virtual businesses, I could never get caught up on everything I needed to learn or I was supposed to do. That's where Jackie and her team at People Principles came in with their signature HR audit for only $349. But get this, if you use code Shannon50, you get $50 off of that. So it's only $300. You'll have peace of mind by the end of the week with this exclusive offer as a Keep What You Earn listener. Here's what's included: a step-by-step self-assessment, a 60-minute strategy session with their HR experts to ensure that you're in compliance and you have a plan for getting on track, an HR template to keep all this important stuff in one place, and a roadmap of the top 3 best practices to implement right now in the next 6 to 12 months. Again, use code Shannon50 to take $50 off of this assessment. Do not miss out on this opportunity or let unintentional HR mistakes derail your business growth. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.